Woof. What was that? The Tigers get swept at Comerica Park on a straight doubleheader against a divisional rival in the Minnesota Twins. First game went to extra innings. Second, the bats just went dead. We'll break it all down next on this edition of your Locked On Tigers postcast.
You are Locked On Tigers postcast, part of Locked On Sports Detroit on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
And we welcome you into this edition of the Locked On Tigers postcast. And what a difference a day makes. Yesterday, the vibes were high. We cruised to a victory. It was my first show here with the Locked On Tigers postcast adventure that were taking place here on the Locked On Detroit network, and everything was great, and I was ready to go today. Roll the sleeves up. Beautiful day. It's Saturday of the Masters. We're going to have that on a small screen. We're going to have the Tigers on the big screen, and that first game was an adventure. We're going to break that game all down, but the second game, just the bats go dead because they were completely absent in every step of the way. Matt Manning had a performance that I don't think the numbers necessarily represent how well he pitched. So we're going to do it this way. We're going to break down game 2 first because that's the most fresh in our mind. And then we're going to break down game 1. And we're going to implement a new segment on this edition of your Locked On Tigers postcast, my studs and duds. Now, this will be something that we do. If you like it, we'll do it all the time. If you don't like it, well, maybe then we won't do it as often. How about that? So either way, want you involved with the show as well. So let me know what you think down in the comments as we progress. But once again, the Tigers swept in the doubleheader this afternoon at Comerica Park against the Minnesota Twins. And down they go. The good feelings from the beginning of the series gone, and it's up to Detroit to get a W tomorrow to earn at least a split in the series. But before we go any further, today's show made possible by FanDuel. Make every moment more. And right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150. Win or lose, all you got to do is visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. And as we get started in our opening segment, let's recap that victory for the Minnesota Twins in game number 2. Like I said, we're going to do a deep dive on game number 2, then go back and look where things went wrong in game number 1, and then I'll have my studs and duds for you. But a 4-1 final in this one. I'll start with Matt Manning, who his outing did not get off to a good start, walked the first 2 batters he faced, but turned in a solid performance, especially when you consider the amount of innings he chewed up in a situation, the second game of a doubleheader, where the first game went 12 innings. So obviously, A.J. Hinch and company were counting on a long outing for Matt Manning, and he delivered just that, 6 2/3, allowing 5 hits, 4 earned runs, struck out 7 and had 2 walks. So a really good day for Matt Manning, but it was the 2-run homer from our old friend Willie Castro that proved to be the difference. And here's where I'm at with Matt Manning. I'm very curious where you are at as well. So let me know down in the comments. Matt Manning, to me, is a everyday starter in the big leagues. And yes, he started the season in AAA, but I just hope that Major League Baseball opportunities will be afforded to him moving forward, because I think he's a guy, and go all the way back to his high draft stock and the high expectations that this organization had for Matt Manning. I think he still has put forth enough of a sample size where you can still feel good about what he can do in his big league career. And again, today, 6 2/3 against a Twins offense that is missing some key parts. Absolutely not enough to get the win. He gets hit with the loss. And that's the second part of the equation of this second game, in which the Tigers lost to the Twins 4-1. But the offense, so bad, to the tune of being retired 14 consecutive times by the starter who, mind you, when we go here, let me just put things in perspective here for you. Simon Woods Richardson entered this game with an ERA above 9. And the way he mowed down Tigers hitters made them look like a minor league ball team. And I'm so worried at this portion in the season that all of a sudden we have a team that just is so lackluster offensively that you watch these games and there's so much pressure on the pitching staff. And even though that's the strength of the team, you just put so much pressure on your pitching staff when you just know in the back of your mind that you get down 2-3 runs and it's just a battle. It's a battle for this offense at this point in time to compile a competitive nature of an offensive lineup moving forward with the amount of holes that there are in the lineup. And Simon Woods Richardson is an example of a pitcher that doesn't have to be a world beater to all of a sudden just mow down this Tigers offense and make them completely or take them completely out of the game. And it wasn't even to where the Tigers were threatening. They didn't have base runners. 14 consecutive retired by Woods Richardson to close out his outing. And you look at the way he just dominated on the mound and the presence of mind that he had, it just is so clear that this Tigers offense has a lot of questions. It's the first win of the season for Simon Woods Richardson. He goes 6 innings, allowed just 2 hits, struck out 5, had 1 earned run, and walked 1. So tough luck loss for Manning, but I think the inability of the offense to really even have an impact on the game is the biggest takeaway in this. And I look at my notes from game number 2, and the notes really, you just kept waiting for something to happen. And maybe it was the way the shadows were hitting the batter's box. I know Dan Dickerson, who was on the TV call today, which by the way, a little bit of a side note, we are so blessed here in Detroit to have 2 of the greatest team broadcasters in the game of baseball between Jason Benetti and Dan Dickerson. And Dan Dickerson showing his versatility today to make the move over to the TV booth, not miss a beat, call an excellent game. Also enjoyed Carlos Pena's presence in the booth as well. I think he's going to be a valuable asset to the Bally Sports team and the work that they do. But it's really been refreshing to see this new broadcast team, first with Jason Benetti, obviously with him being gone today. We talked a little bit about him yesterday, but calls such a tremendous game. So funny. The chemistry is there. The camaraderie is there. And then Dan Dickerson today. But I'm getting distracted. And that's going to happen from time to time, which you guys will learn with me that there's a lot that goes into this brain and there's not a lot of space for it. I'm not the smartest guy in the world. And there's going to be times where I'm like a kid with ADHD. And especially I think it's amplified when the Tigers lose because my blood just, I hate to lose more than I like to win. And it's just a very, very sad way to be, especially as a Detroiter, because let's be honest, well, we know unfortunately the latter happens a little bit more than the former. So that said, I'm gonna dial it in. I'm gonna be a little bit better. Wings have already faced off in a huge game. Season comes down to this, taking on the Toronto Maple Leafs. But this is Locked On Tigers postcast, and let's focus a little bit. So the offense goes completely dead in game number 2. And more on this, obviously, in the studs and duds portion of the program. But Javi Baez, it's early, it's April, and maybe this is my, I don't want to say hate, but my dislike for the player coming through, and that I just don't like seeing him in a Tigers uniform because of the way that he can't play every day. And I feel for AJ Hinch. He's got to put him in there. I feel for the fans of the Tigers that have to watch this guy play every day, but he's just not an everyday shortstop anymore. And I don't care how much you pay him, but that might be the first order of business if I'm AJ Hinch. And unfortunately, maybe some of his potential replacements didn't exactly have their best days. Obviously, you think about Zach McKinstry playing shortstop. He had the costly error in game number 1. But Javi Baez, and it's not fair to put an entire game in game number 2 and on one player on the offensive side, but he looks lost at the plate. And that's just the way that he is as a player in 2024. And maybe it's something that you gotta get over. And I don't know how I'm going to get to that point in my headspace, but if he continues to play because of the contract situation and because he was supposedly brought in to be this great player, then sure. But it just puts your offense in an offense that can ill afford to have as many holes as they already do, given the lack of power and the lack of potential of this offense. You don't want to take another precious spot in the order and give it to a guy like Javi Baez. But game number 2 does not go well. The Tigers are shut down by Simon and Woods. And you know what? It's crazy. It's one of the longest names in Major League Baseball. They're actually talking about that on the broadcast. Simon Woods Richardson. It's got the high arcing Woods Richardson that goes all the way around the back of his jersey. But point being, 4-1 the final in this one. Tigers fall to 8-6, now 2-4 at home after the doubleheader sweep. We're going to continue breaking this one down. But before we go any further, we'll have a word. And when we come back, we'll talk about game number 2. Today's show is made possible by Ibotta. That's right. It is springtime, and that means spring cleaning. Spring has sprung. It was a beautiful day at Comerica Park today, blue sky. So if that means stocking up on cleaning supplies or swapping out your winter clothes for new spring clothes, you got to make sure you're using Ibotta. Get real cash back with every single purchase. Ibotta is a free app that gives you the most cash back every time you shop on hundreds of items, from groceries to beauty supplies to toys, so you can make sure you're beating that nasty I word, inflation, no matter what you're purchasing. Other apps give you points that don't amount to much, but with Ibotta, you just add your offers in the app, upload your receipt, and you get real cash that you can cash out to your bank account, PayPal, or gift cards. That's right, folks. Real cash. That's what I'm talking about. So right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta by using the code LOCKEDONMLB when you register. So just go to the App Store or Google Play for that matter. Download the free Ibotta app to start earning that cash back. And don't forget to use that code LOCKEDONMLB. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store, and use code LOCKEDONMLB. Now, first game, there's a lot more to break down. The notes page is a mile long for what we're working with on the first page, because it was, or on the first game rather, because it was a roller coaster. It was the longest game the Tigers have played in an extra innings setting since the runner on second base being implemented post-pandemic. So all that, I want to go back to the beginning in which we saw Kenta Maeda make his best start in a Tigers uniform. And you look at the way Kenta Maeda was able to work through the strike zone, keep hitters off balance, compiled 6 innings, allowed just the 1 earned run. And one of those runs actually was unearned from his overthrow to second base. And that you can't assume a double play, but it would have been a nice, 1-6-3 double play. And you know what? Because I'm like a kid with ADD sometimes, if you hear a dog barking in the background, we all love dogs, right? We're all dogs people living in, the neighbor's dog. Sometimes they're going to bark, and that's just the way they are. So you're going to have to give that dog a little talking to. But again, we all love dogs. And when you're live on the air and you hear the dog barking and barking away, maybe they agree with what I'm saying here about Kenta Maeda. But I thought it was his best start. But largely in the takeaway, if you could do a takeaway from both these games, as far as what the takeaway that was similar in game 1 as game 2, is just the fact that this Tigers offense was dominated. And Joe Nathan at one point had delivered a first pitch strike on 15 of 18 batters that he faced. He struck out 12 of the first 15 batters he faced, and he was dominant, which again is one of those concernings and those areas of concern. And I said Joe Ryan. Excuse me. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to make anybody live back to the horrors of Joe Nathan pitching for us. Joe Ryan. No, just 2 first names. So bear with me here. But 6 innings pitched, 6 hits, 3 runs, an earned run, 1 walk, and struck out 12. And again, this Tigers offense looked very, very pedestrian, which is an area of concern when you think about games like this that are played. But let's go all the way to extra innings, right? And before we get there, how do we get to the extra innings? Well, we know the Tigers were up by 1 run, but unfortunately Shelby Miller gave up that solo home run in the 8th to extend the game, obviously. But also what made it difficult with that is that it was the first hit that Miller had given up in his season in 2024. So it's hard to say, blame this game on Miller considering how well he's been pitching. But the fact that Jeffers got that home run to left center, traveled over 400 feet, and was able to essentially extend that game and get to extra innings really is where you're going to look back at this one and say this was a game the Tigers could have won. This is a game they could have had. They had the 1-run lead in the 8th. Now, let's get to extra innings. I thought the runner on second base, obviously that plays such a huge role in it. Credit to the Tigers for showing some resiliency there in the 11th inning because they went down in the top of the 11th, but good at-bats by the Tigers in that that home half of the 11th inning to extend it and eventually force that 12th inning because remember, in that 11th inning, the Tigers were able to get that RBI single. It was good situational baseball by the Tigers, and eventually it was Colt Keith singling to right that allowed Torkelson to score. I was hoping the Tigers could have won it there. Obviously, I was hoping the Tigers could have won it there in the 11th, but when you got to the 12th and Alex Lange came in to pitch, it seems like it's just an adventure when Alex Lange is on the mound. Now, I was talking to my brother during the game, and I told him Alex Lange to me feels like the guy that takes behind the back, step back 3-pointers in AAU basketball. And when he makes it, you're like, this is awesome. What an incredible player. But when it goes awry, it's so frustrating when it goes wrong because he's got the stuff. You got to come in and throw strikes. And I know that's pointing out the obvious, and I know we all know that, but you got to throw strikes. And it's just so difficult to watch a player that is in such an important role like Alex Lange not have his stuff. And I think the 12th inning being kind of a microcosm of that because he has the 2 walks to load the bases. And then he looked really, really good in those at-bats to get the strikeouts. And you look at the strikeouts that he got to get the bases loaded with 2 outs. And I know he walked a runner home, but the fact of the matter is there's times where Alex Lange looks so good, but he gets hit with the loss. And Zach McKinstry, that play in the 12th is so tough to watch. And it's a play he makes 99 out of 100 times. You heard Dan Dickerson say it on the telecast that the ball took a funny hop and skipped, but I'm sure Zach McKinstry would tell you that he needs to make that play. He needs to make that play 100 times out of 100, not 99 out of 100, because that really, you felt the wheels just fall off because Alex Lange, to his credit, battled some adversity, self-induced adversity, but made the pitch to get out of that inning with just allowing the 1 run. And then you're into the bottom of the 12th, down just 1 run, runner on second, nobody out. That's an opportunity for you to extend the game even more. But obviously we know what happened then. McKinstry gets put in and throws, and he's put into pitch, and it's a tough spot to be in. Another 3-run homer and 7 runs in that inning for the Twins. 7 runs with 1 hit. The only hit was the 3-run homer, and it's frustrating. It's tough to watch, But when you play 162 games a season, there's going to be these days where you feel like the sky is falling, and hopefully, based on the way today went, the Tigers can rebound, bounce back, and put together somewhat of or put together a winning effort on Sunday to get the split with the Twins over the weekend. We're going to close it out with my studs and duds of the day. And when you have a doubleheader, there's a lot to choose from. So we'll do that next on Locked On Tigers Postcast. All right, today's show made possible by LinkedIn. That's right. It is. Are you struggling to close deals? B2B selling is tougher than ever, and that's why I want to tell you about LinkedIn and the Sales Navigator. That's right. LinkedIn Sales Navigator is a sales intelligence platform that helps professionals effectively prospect and engage high-value customers to help drive revenue and increase sales performance. If that sounds like a lot of corporate legalese, whatever it is, let me tell you this. LinkedIn's Sales Navigator is fueled by LinkedIn's 1 billion member platform. Sales Navigator gives you the most up-to-date first-party data, enabling you to unlock conversations with the people that matter. Right now, you can try LinkedIn Sales Navigator and get a 60-day free trial at linkedin.com/lockedon. That is linkedin.com/lockedon for a 60-day free trial. Let LinkedIn Sales Navigator help you sell like a superstar today. Just go to linkedin.com/lockedon and get started. Today's show also made possible by FanDuel. That's right. Today's show made possible by FanDuel. It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Red Wings trying to make the playoffs. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. You can bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, we wrap it up with studs and duds, which, as the name of the segment would indicate, who stood out to me for the right reason, who stood out to me for the wrong reason. So I'm going to start, and maybe I should start in the negative sense. I'll start with game one with our studs and duds, but I'll try and keep it positive here and start with my stud. My game one stud, Kenta Maeda and Kerry Carpenter. They played well. Kerry Carpenter with the home run that got the Tigers off, got the Tigers offense on the board, and started to get the momentum going with that 2-run homer in the first. And like I said in the earlier portion of the program, it definitely was Maeda's best start. And I think it left a lot to feel good about in terms of how he kind of struggled at portions of his first 2 starts. But the 6 innings was encouraging, just the 5 hits, only the 1 earned run, 2 runs in total, but 5 strikeouts and no walks. So really impressive stuff there. And on a day you get swept in doubleheader, listen, I hope you hear it in my voice. I'm not, sounding the salute of the greatest pitching staff in the world with Kenta Maeda, but you feel good about what he put forth, and same with Kerry Carpenter. Now my duds, and I could spend a lot of time on this, but we've already talked about Alex Lange, and for him to come in and just look like a shell of himself at times, not have control, walk a couple of guys, didn't get any favors from his defense, but obviously the way that 12th inning unraveled, you got to hold Alex Lange responsible as the dud of game number 1. And I'll throw Zach McKinstry in there as well. I think McKinstry's a tough kid. Fire up chips. I know we love the Central Michigan product. He'll bounce back. There's no doubt about it. But that was a performance in an inning in particular that he would like to forget. So My studs for game number 2, and I'll use this term a little bit loosely because, again, the final line of Matt Manning wasn't necessarily stud worthy, but the fact of the matter is he went 6 2/3, and you feel really good about that. And I've been a big Matt Manning believer because you've seen it when it clicks and when he's on, and you just think if we can bottle that up and maintain that as who Matt Manning is on a consistent level, that's something to feel good about. So Matt Manning, 6 2/3, 4 earned runs, but struck out 7 and walked 2 while scattering 5 hits. My other stud, and I'm sorry it's taken me this long to get to it on this portion of the program towards the end, because it was really the lone bright spot today, but Wenzel Perez, first career hit in game number 2 and his first career extra base hit in the ensuing at bat, in which he turned what looked like just a routine single into a double. Perez can really fly, and he was playing with some energy, and sometimes you need that, that youth movement to really implement some energy and some excitement. And I thought Wenzel Perez did his best in that sense in game number 2 and was able to at least provide some kind of spark for this Tigers team that really needed it. And I'm excited to see how and if his career blossoms now that he's at the big league level and can do a lot of different things. There was the one miscommunication play between him and Veerling in center field. Ultimately, I think that's got to be Veerling's ball. But Wenzel Perez, a nice debut to remember, 2 hits on the day, and he gets the second stud nod for game number 2. Lastly, I got to give Simon Woods Richardson credit. He retired his last 14 in a row, and he had 9.64 ERA entering today's game, but he goes 6 innings and was just dominant all together, allowed just the 1 run and struck out 5. So that said, the other duds for this game number 2 is just the Tigers offense in total. I mean, this Tigers offense, the way they were in game number 2, you're not going to win any games scoring 1 run. You're not going to win any games with no traffic on the bases. And it's the same story that we've said time and time again. So I'm not going to scream into the microphone and continue to say it, but just an overall really, really disappointing day and just a disappointing effort from the bats in both games for the Tigers in that matter. And yes, there were times in the first game that you saw some things you liked, but absolutely nothing in that second game, which makes it so disappointing altogether. So my duds, Tigers offense in game number 2. I mentioned Javi Baez. He'll probably take the brunt of the criticism, and maybe rightfully so, but that's certainly how I feel with it all. So Tigers unfortunately get swept and now need to win on Sunday against the Twins to at least earn a split in the 4-game series against the Minnesota Twins before taking on the Rangers for 4 and then on the road to Minnesota. So they'll be getting familiar with the Minnesota Twins. And I think it was 7 of an 11-game sample size. Yeah, exactly. Because then you've got 3 with the Minnesota Twins after the 4-game series and just the Rangers series split in between. So thanks everyone for tuning in. I will also say at the very end here, I'm just and I hope this came through on the first show, but first show is going, there's a lot of bells and whistles to this. I'm new to this. I've been in radio my whole life. Now we're on the different platforms. We're on the YouTube. So appreciate everybody bearing with me with some of the technical learning curves, and just want to give a huge shout out and thank you to Scott Bentley. What a tremendous job he does on Locked On Tigers. And I meant to say this in my very first show, but think of this as an addition to wall-to-wall Tigers coverage. Scott and I are looking forward to working collaboratively, me doing the post-game stuff, Scott doing the daily stuff. He's been tremendous. So there's a couple people sending me tweets. Hey, where are you going to be on with Scott? Or is Scott and this, that, and the other? Are you replacing? Nobody's replacing anybody. And we're just working together to bring you wall-to-wall Tigers coverage. It is an awesome initiative from the Locked On Podcast Network. They're doing post-game shows in all different markets, and I'm fortunate enough to be the post-game voice on the postcast for Locked On Tigers. So huge shout out to everybody tuning in. Thanks so much. Really appreciate you making the Locked On Tigers postcast part of your day. Hopefully the Tigers will bounce back and be ready to go in game number 4 of the series on Sunday to try to earn that split. We'll be with you post game, and be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet already. We are building this thing from scratch. It's Locked On Sports Detroit. You can find it on YouTube. You can find the audio version of today's show wherever you get your podcast. It's always a pleasure to be with you on the air. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we will see you next time on the Locked On Tigers Postcast.